Hi, this is Dr. Story. I've been a chiropractor for 22 years, and I'm going to show you today some little tricks that I've learned on how to adjust the fifth lumbar vertebrae. Now, I was trained by a guy named Richard Gohl, who I think was probably the best spinal adjuster that this world has ever seen. And I was fortunate to be able to learn from him. I learned a lot of things from him, and I have tried to teach other chiropractors how to do this. And I found really good success with some visual cues. Now, the first thing to understand is that the L5 vertebrae, the best way to adjust the vertebrae is to improve your palpation skills. The important thing to understand with the L5 vertebrae is it's hidden. Most of the time, unless the person has a spondylolisthesis, it's going to be actually hard to find that L5 vertebrae. So what I do is when I find it, I actually have them bring their legs up to open up the back side of the spine. I will usually use my fingers and find that S2 and S1, and then you sink in and you'll find that L5 vertebrae you can find. I'll always kind of go up and you'll find that L4 vertebrae, that vertebrae, the bone, the actual spinous process is slightly bigger. But you gotta open it up a little bit. If the patient's spine is too much lordotic, then that L5 spinous process slightly goes, it feels like it goes forward, but that's not what's happening. What's happening is all the soft tissues, the supraspinous ligament and the fat and the fascia and the tendons all kind of bunch up and you're not able to get your finger on it. Now, if this patient, we were trying to adjust a PRS, very often when I was first in school, I always thought of thinking of the rotation and pushing down. That's actually not what you want to do. The trick to adjusting a good L5 vertebrae is to actually go posterior. Now, straight posterior. Now, the problem is if the person's lying down, by the virtue of taking the tissue tension that way to their left, it's very difficult to get a posterior to anterior force. And what I saw Dr. Gohl do, and I learned this early on, was he would have the patient lying on their side, he would pull the tissue tension up. So even if you were adjusting the person from the right side, in theory trying to do a PRS, he would actually take tissue tension as if it was a PLS. So the thing is, by taking tissue tension and taking your piezoform and pushing up, almost upwards, what you do is you get a good grip on that spinous process. And by rolling the patient over, then with your elbow out, you're able to actually push the vertebrae from a pure posterior to anterior direction rather than rotation. So that's one little trick that I've learned. The second trick is that when the patient is on their side, the position that they need to be in is almost like a car teetering off the cliff. If you had a car that was just teetering off the cliff, the car could go either way. In other words, it's relaxed. It could fall down the mountain or it could be saved. If the person has more pressure and can control themselves on the table, then it's like the car being on sturdy ground. You can't push it. If they roll over too much, obviously they come off the table. So in the perfect world, when you adjust L5, the person would be just teetering off the table, but you have full control of them because you have your hand on the arm and your hand is right on the vertebrae and your thigh is against their thigh. So they should feel not that they're going to fall off, but they're not sure where they're going to go. That's the key. The second thing is, Dr. Gohl always talked about this, was you have to stabilize the pelvis so the pelvis stays stable for you to adjust the L5 onto something. Now, I really had a hard time getting that until probably about 8 or 9 years into practice. But what happened is, when the person's on their side, I would stabilize their pelvis by stabilizing their leg. It really didn't work. What I found was I learned how to stabilize kind of at an oblique 45-degree angle. And by doing that, you stabilize the pelvis, but you kept it open. Open enough that you didn't close down the front where the disc is, but you weren't extended closing down the facets. So in other words, that L5 was just kind of free floating in there. That's why he was able to get such excellent adjustments. So he stabilized the pelvis with his pelvis. The patient was literally a car teetering off the cliff, off the table, and then the tissue tension was pulled from the opposite direction. By doing that, he got the greatest adjustments, and I myself find that when going to other chiropractors, I can teach people how to adjust the L5 much better. And this is how you do it. So if you have any specific questions, ask in the comment section below. I'm very curious what your thinking is on this subject. And if you like my videos, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and hopefully this is going to benefit you and the patients that you see.